Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. The information here is strictly for educational purposes only and is not a recommendation to trade. You are solely responsible for your own trading actions. No members of DSC Capital were harmed in the making of this video.
Good evening, everybody. It is Nostradamus Trading, and I'm going to be doing the Sunday week ahead. Rob isn't with us today. We kind of scheduled the video a little bit later just because we thought, due to all the geopolitical events being with Venezuela, the market could see sort of a wild open, and we didn't want to make a video and then the open sort of just kind of throws a wrench in things. But it was, I want to say it was a pretty calm open, and I'm just going to be sort of doing my whole review of what I expect primary and secondary, and then I'll also share what Rob had in mind. So let's just take a look, at what we have in front of us. First of all, the market, obviously the market initiated lower. This was last week, so the market initiated lower, came back, and then had this responsive behavior. And after this sort of responsive behavior, so this sort of two-way battle over here, the market did start to initiate lower once again, pulled back, and then we've seen that continuation. So what this created is it created a double distribution profile, and the VPOC was above, and we closed down here. So when I seen this, two things really came into mind. One is, one, we have this low volume node. This low volume node would be something interesting for a possible test of this area and then a continuation lower. That's kind of my first idea. The second idea is the fact that value remained above and then price closed, down out of value. That to me is like price is getting ahead of itself. It's leaving value behind. That's kind of, what I those are kind of just some thoughts running in like the back of my mind. Another thing we have this, very large battle zone consolidation from over here, and the market obviously initiated away and it tested it. It couldn't really quite get a new high. This was sort of the first test. This is kind of being the second and third test. Third test being in the Sunday reopen. So that's another thing that we have. We have this very large area below us. So this area becomes important because, well, it becomes important when looking at the scenarios. So, what was I expecting for this week, and like what am I still watching out for? So one, my primary was short, kind of based on the idea that the prior weekly low was a double TPO low. Let's just get that. This was a double TPO low initially before it got taken out. And the primary, well, it's not really primary anymore, just, kind of based on what's going on over here. Now its primary is really looking for this VPOC to be tested. Uh, so I guess I'll just sort of adjust to that. Being that, this low volume node is now has been has been traded, or it's starting to get traded. What I'm interested in is pretty much the market maybe pulling back. I don't know how far it would pull back, but maybe pullbacks that would really look for a continuation to one test the VPOC of the prior weekly point of control, which is also the VPOC of the upper distribution. That's pretty much going to be my primary scenario, given that this reaction has happened. And if this is to continue, it is sort of, well, this week, last week's trading is an inside week. So if this is to continue, what would I like to see for a possible continuation? So let me just, put this. If this is, I don't know, let's just say it trades over here. If this was to continue, I would prefer if the profile does have a little bit of a low volume node. So I don't know if the profile is looking something like this. I prefer if there is a little bit of a low volume node between that high, the break of that high for a continuation, just so, because like when you see a low volume node at these key reference points, it's kind of like an initiation for higher. So that's what I would prefer. I would prefer it to have a low volume node, and then I'm thinking in the back of my mind, okay, this may continue higher. Where's it going to continue? Well, one, I mean, there is some pretty far targets up here, just being some structure that's left behind, singles, these naked point of controls, and overall breaking from this inside weak. So if it is breaking away from this inside weak, we do start to kind of trade into this area. So this low volume area, and then this, honestly, it may just trade sideways in between this area before it decides what it wants to do. That's one. Now, really, another thing that it could do is, it could honestly just trade in between this low volume area, fill this in first before it does this whole move higher. That's like another, that's saying that it doesn't just pull back and go. It fills in this area, it might pull back, and then it goes, instead of sort of just going initially. And that's now the primary scenario. Now, initially, so this is kind of initially what my short scenario was, is the market would test into this low volume area. Let's highlight this. The market would test into this area, it would hold, and then we would see the continuation lower for a break of the prior weekly low. And then after breaking prior weekly low, same thing. So really, it's this week's high and this week's low is really kind of a spot to pay attention to, just because it is an inside week. And like I said, that break is pretty lame. But those two areas would be a spot to watch. What I would have liked to see, if this was to break out to the downside, same sort of thing on the profile, just like a low volume area to show that there's initiation to the downside. And then if that was to break, I would pretty much just watch for this entire value area to have been traded through. So once we sort of lost this point of control and lost value area high, expect it to trade back to value area low, and then either one, it starts to distribute in this area, like continued acceptance, or it continues lower, possibly down to this high volume node. That was initially the short scenario and initially the primary scenario, but just given how this has been playing out, how this is playing out, that has changed. And I don't think I have too much else to add. Let me just see. We can just take maybe a look at this profile, kind of see what's going on. So I mean, you could see it. The reopen, it opened, and then like it immediately just kind of ran lower. Now, if it ran lower and sort of initiated lower, that would be interesting for a continued break to the downside. It didn't do that. It ran lower, sort of had this massive look below and fail, and now it's starting to trade higher. And I mean, you can even really consider this area. Well, it's pretty early to say, but as long as this area can hold, you could really consider this area as an excess, as a tail, just because it's the open. The opening period did leave this sort of response, and now it's rotating the other way. So this could, like I said, this could be a very strong sign of a reversal. And if that is the case, if we zoom out, this is how the market has been trading, meaning that it has just been trading in between this bracketing side to side range. So based on this response, it may honestly just trade to the other side. And if there's a continuation, we would watch for, like I said, that low volume node break, follow through that break initiative, and we would see where it goes from there. Uh, that's pretty much all I have to cover for today. Like I said, Rob isn't here. I believe Rob's scenario was a higher low retest of the prior weekly low, which sort of makes sense because when we take a look at the prior week's low, sort of from a like a volume perspective, the market initiated lower, sort of had this responsive move, and then we were able to find continued sellers, and then once again it became responsive just above or right at the prior weekly low. So that was pretty interesting before it moved away. So uh Rob's scenario was a pullback, probably a higher low retest for the continuation. And I'm pretty sure this action is catching Rob's interest for, like I said, maybe a possible move to the other side. Uh, that's all I'm gonna cover for today. If you guys did enjoy, like, comment, and subscribe. Also, me and Rob did release another video, which was the New Year's trap, setting yourself up for success in 2026. That was just pretty much like a goal setting video. And if you guys did not watch that, be sure to check it out. Let us know what you guys think, because like I said in the last video, we want to do kind of daily or like weekly stuff for crude, but we also want to do content related stuff, so everybody is learning something. That's all I had to cover. If you guys, like I said, if you guys did enjoy, like, comment, subscribe, and we will catch you in next week's video. Take care.